Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Careers in STEM session for SciFest 2024. My name's Karen from Virtual Excursions Australia, and we've brought together a fabulous group of people to speak to you today about their journey in science. So we've got people coming to us from Inverell, Western Australia, New South Wales. So thank you all for joining us today. SciFest is part of National Science Week and is brought to you by Inspiring Australia New South Wales. It enables to do all of these programs for free. So across all of National Science Week, and we're halfway through, which is very, very exciting and very good to see so many of you joining for multiple sessions. So thank you very much. So journeys in science, everyone's career comes from a different way. So I am a science communicator. I've had a passion for science since I was a young child. I started my passion with collecting rocks. So that's where I began my journey, collecting rocks. I found an assignment that I did in year 4 on volcanoes. And then I found another assignment that I did in primary school on sharks. And when I think back, that is 2 of my major passions. I've been a scuba diver for over 30 years, and I have been collecting and building my rock collection for slightly longer. I won't tell you how long, but it's those passions that I had as a child that has stayed with me throughout my career. And I was very lucky to work at the Australian Museum for over 20 years. And I started there as a volunteer, helping out doing tours and activities and programs like that. And then I ended up being able to work there for, as I said, for 20 years across education and science communication. So it's these things that we love as a child that can stick with us. So if you've got a passion for science now, get those ideas, see what you can come up with in the future. You may be able to invent something new. So today we have 4 scientists with us today who are going to share their journeys. So we've got Belinda, who's director of the Quantal Bioscience, Nico from the OPAL project at ANSTO, Joseph, who's a Seismic's geophysicist at Geoscience Australia, and Craig from the Great Barrier Reef Education. So we've got a really great group of people that are going to share their journey with you today. So first of all, I'd like to invite Belinda, who's the director of Quantal Bioscience, to join us and share her journey.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Belinda Chapman, and as Karen said, I am actually the director of Quantal Bioscience. So you will have never heard of Quantal Bioscience, but I'm very proud of it. Quantal Bioscience is a company, research laboratory that we created. So I have been a microbiologist my whole life. And a research microbiologist my whole life. So actually asking questions about microorganisms. So if you don't know what I mean when I say microorganisms, what I'm talking about are things that you might know as bacteria or fungi, or sometimes even just as germs. And germs or bacteria, fungi, and microorganisms are all around us every single day, all around us, actually inside us and on us every single day of the year. And they are absolutely fascinating. So how I kind of started my journey was not dissimilar to Karen, but I didn't collect rocks. I actually like to collect animals. So I like to collect anything that I could kind of find and put in a jar or put in a little box for a while and study them. So I was convinced that I was going to be probably a veterinarian or a zoologist when I started my career. And so I would collect snails and slugs and spiders and that kind of thing, put them in Tic Tac boxes and so on. And then when I was probably in year 1 at school, the teachers gave me a little project where I had to collect slaters, those little bugs that kind of burrow in under logs and rocks and that kind of thing. And again, that kind of got me hooked. So I liked the idea of collecting different animals and seeing how they kind of worked. But as I grew older, I also started to like things like physics and chemistry and engineering and all sorts of other types of science and STEM kind of subjects. And by the time I got to university, I really was unsure about what I was going to do. All I knew was it was going to be something in that kind of STEM area. And I had never actually heard about microorganisms at all until that time that I went to university. I really don't think we got taught about them when I was at school. And I went to university. I kind of didn't quite know. I did a few subjects in first year. And at the end of first year, I went to a lunchtime lecture that was by a woman called Ilse Dallens. So this was at Sydney University. And she did this lunchtime lecture on microbiology. And she told us how amazing microbes were. And that was really the first time I can imagine, or I can remember rather, hearing about microorganisms and how amazing they were. And what I heard was that they do things like they are important in the kinds of foods that we eat. So a lot of our foods actually come about, things like salamis and cheeses and bread and so on, all come around because of the actions of microorganisms. So this is actually foods that are made by microbes. So I learned about foods. I learned that all the soil around us and how our crops actually grow, so much of that comes down to the microorganisms in the soil. And when I was first at university, that was still kind of a little bit radical. But now we hear about it all the time, how important it is to feed the soil so that you feed the microbes and the microbes then feed your plants. So I was really interested in that aspect of microbiology. And then I heard about how microorganisms also were able to obviously cause disease, but also potentially to cure diseases as well. And so that started me thinking about things like gut health. So how microorganisms actually survive in our guts and help us to live healthy lives. So all of those things that I've just talked about now, believe it or not, all of those things, so food microbiology, soil microbiology, environmental microbiology, water microbiology, and animal health are all things that I now currently work in. So we actually are in a really lucky position as microbiologists in my company to be able to do research on pretty much anything that we would like to do. And so over the years, what I have done is taken all of those different types of microbiology that I've been really interested in since I went to university, and I've worked in different types of microbiology along the way, and I've now pulled those all together and managed to make a company out of those. And so I do all different types of microbiology every single day. And so you kind of might wonder where I'm sitting at the moment. So I'm actually sitting at Sydney Zoo, and some people might have seen me on another virtual excursion earlier this week where I was presenting from in front of the elephants. The elephants it's a little bit wet outside today, so I'm actually sitting under one of the shelters today, but I've got beside me the orangutan and the cassowary. And so they are two of the animals that I actually do some work with at the moment, and I study all the different types of microorganisms that are in their poo, and so that I can understand better how their gut and how healthy it is, and how it's also helping them to break down their food and get the most energy from food as well. So sorry, I've just noticed that someone's saying we can't see their screens. We can't see your screen, so I'm not quite sure who that's saying that.
I can see you still.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So so that is so every day I might be moving around we have a laboratory, and so I might be doing some food microbiology, then I might be doing some agricultural microbiology, then I might be doing some medical microbiology, and I might be looking at things like, as I say, the poo here from cassowaries and orangutans on the other side of me as well. So that's a little bit about who I am, and I'm happy to kind of answer a few questions if anybody's got a few questions.
Excellent. So if you wanted to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, we can ask them to Belinda. I certainly was really fascinated with the Zoo of Poo program. And
Yep.
we do have the recording of that session that at the end of SciFest, you will get sent a copy of every single session that we've had throughout the week. Other than the trivias, because watching someone else do trivia is not particularly exciting, but you'll have a chance to watch the Zoo of Poo program because it was really very interesting. So what did you do with your collection, Belinda, that you used to have of little things in boxes?
My collection of little things in boxes, what I used to do with them is keep them for a while and then turn them loose again. I have to say that a few of them maybe passed away in captivity when I was very young. As always happens, you keep a few snails in a box for too long. They don't really like being kept in a box for too long. But really, I learned pretty early on that I have to release the release the animals back into the wild. And so one of the good things though about microorganisms is I can actually have a whole zoo of those microbes in my lab at any one time, and I never have to release them back into the wild. So that's one of the really good things about being a zoo of microorganisms. I can fit basically a whole zoo of microorganisms into the palm of my hand. And I can keep them there. Well, I wouldn't keep them on my hand, but I could put them on a Petri dish or something like that and keep them in my lab for weeks and weeks and weeks. And actually, I can freeze them even and keep them for hundreds of years frozen in my lab. And whenever I want to play with them, and I really do think about the science that I do as being playing. So whenever I want to play with them and learn something about them and take them out and give them a run or anything like that, I can do that because unlike real animals, I don't have to worry about them dying. I actually know how to take care of them in the lab. And one of the best things I can do is put them into hibernation in one of my minus 80-degree freezers and cool them right down. And then I can keep them, as I say, for hundreds of years and take them out and play with them whenever I want to and do
Wow.
research on them.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. A couple of questions coming through. Amber was wondering, do rocks have bacteria?
Oh, that's a great question. So rocks do have bacteria. So rocks and bacteria can be really closely associated, actually. And so bacteria and other types of microorganisms as well, like fungi and lichen. And so I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of lichen. Sometimes people call them like moss. So they think it's moss, but it's actually lichen. And lichen are actually three different microorganisms that all join together, join forces, and are able to do things like gradually erode rock. So lichens are actually comprised of a mold, a yeast, and a bacteria. And those molds, yeast, and bacteria, they're the three different types of microorganisms that we study most.
Awesome.
I can actually see a question there asking
Yep.
about, do I study algae? So very occasionally we do work with algae as well. We tend to work though with the single cell kind of algae, which are often actually bacteria as well. So they are algae. Sometimes they're called algae, but they're actually bacteria as well. And so we do work with those kind of microorganisms, but we don't work with the really big algae. Once it gets kind of too big, that sort of takes it out of the realm of microbiology and more into the area of kind of more the plant sort of science.
Yep.
And so we don't work with those really big algae.
So Harvard Academy wanted to know, and I think this is something that you do, is the difference between good poo and bad poo to do with gut health.
Yes, so there's definitely big differences in there. So what we do is we look at all the different types of microbes that are in a poo sample, and we have like databases, so big catalogs of information about good bacteria and bad bacteria. And so what we can look at, so for example, let's say this could be a human as well, but an animal. might have a change of diet or might be stressed about something. And we can actually see that the numbers of different microorganisms change in their poo. And that kind of helps us to categorize, is it good poo or bad poo? And obviously our goal is always to kind of turn it back into good poo. And the best way to do that usually is to make sure that people get all those things that you know you need to have, so that you have a good diet, you have lots of rest, and relaxation, and the right kind of exercise. And they are the best kind of ways usually to get your gut health kind of healthy again. And it's the same for animals as well.
Fabulous. Thank you. I think we'll save the rest of the questions to the end. Belinda,
Awesome.
thank you very much. And we are going to pass over to Nico now, who is part of the OPAL project at ANSTO. So just bear with me. I'm going to add Nico as a spotlight. Take it away.
Cool. Awesome. I do apologize if I drop out accidentally. For some reason, my internet connection is being a bit wonky at the moment. But yeah, hello everyone. My name's Nico. I'm here. I work here at ANSTO as an OPAL project engineer. So I studied electrical engineering to get here. But yeah, so as a OPAL project engineer, I'm more or less responsible for any small problems which pop up here and there. Like let's say they want to monitor vibrations of the motor, we might put like a little vibration sensor on there, or it could just be replacing an older, small, obsolete component and upgrading it to a newer one. But in terms of what I did to get here, my journey, I'll go all the way back to high school because I'm still relatively fresh. So I finished high school way back in 2017. And at that time, if I remember all my subjects correctly, the two most important ones here were physics and mathematics. I enjoyed those two the most. And in physics, we did a subunit in physics called quantum and quarks, all to do with atoms and atomic structure and things like that. So around that time, I knew that's what I wanted to do. But once I finished high school, I didn't fully know what I wanted to do just yet. So I actually spent my first year, not necessarily taking a gap year, but I went to TAFE and I did a Cert 2 in, if I forgot the name of it, but it's basically the first year to become an electrician because I loved the hands-on aspect of it. But then from that, I more or less figured out for myself that electrical engineering is what screamed out to me most. In my pastime as a little hobby, I'd play with little Arduinos, with Raspberry Pis with my brother. So I knew from that alone and from doing the hands-on stuff that electrical engineering was the way I wanted to go. So started uni, I finished uni back in 2022. So I got to deal with COVID and the bushfires. So it was a bit of a challenging time, but made it through in the end. And before I actually worked here at OPAL, I started here at ANSTO on its graduate program. So our graduate program runs every 2 years. It consists on 4 6-month rotations. So there's 10 of us in total. And what it involves is once we come here, every 6 months we rotate from one team to another within ANSTO. We're quite a big company here at Lucas Heights. We have I believe we're up to over 1,000 employees. I think maybe 1,500 even. And we have heaps of teams everywhere, all doing different things, but all working collectively to help build Australia's nuclear science capability. And things like that. So it's what we do here is quite cool. So when I first started, I actually was on the team responsible for the power delivery side of it. So your substations going down to your switchboards and your GPOs you find at the wall. Because in university, I specialized in power engineering. So for me, it was nice and comfortable. It's what I studied for. So it was a nice, easy get straight into it. But from there, that was my first 6 months. My following 6 months, in August, I started here at OPAL. The OPAL reactor is the only reactor we have here in Australia. So very alone, me being in a little graduate, I was thinking, you know what, I want to get this on my resume. how good would it look to say worked at the only reactor in Australia? And yeah, I started here and I've been loving it more or less ever since. There's heaps of things to do here, heaps to learn. There's surprisingly a lot of still electrical sides to it because you have lots of little controllers monitoring a process, but altogether, it all comes to making sure the reactor runs safely. And some of the main things we do with a reactor is we produce nuclear medicine for, I believe, 90, I think for all of Australia, but I think it accounts for about 90% or could be 100%. My memory is a bit fuzzy there, unfortunately. But yeah, we produce nuclear medicine for Australia. We irradiate silicon. So silicon on its own is not very conductive. But what we can do is we can pop it into the reactor, bombard it with heaps of neutrons, and we change some of the silicon atoms into phosphorus. And once it's there, once it's turned into phosphorus, it actually becomes a semiconductor. And you can use these for some, for usually expensive electronics. So you use it in high-speed railways. You can use it in some computer electronics. It's just for its structure, I guess it's just very quick acting or quick, I forgot the exact word for it. But yeah, so there's that. And then another thing we do with it is you can think of the OPAL reactor as well as a neutron producer. And what we can do with those neutrons as well is we can shoot it down these things called beamlines. And what we have heaps of scientists on the beamlines, and what they can do is use these neutrons, and with how it interacts with materials and scatter off it, you can study the construction of it. You can figure out certain properties of it. You can use it to date things going back millions of years. And I think one of the cool things I figured out here, I don't think it was this reactor, it might have been down at the synchrotron. The image everyone's seen a lot online of the coronavirus, that structure of it. The cyclotron down at the Melbourne actually was the one to produce that image. So I didn't know about it. I thought it was quite cool. But yeah, from day to day, I more or less help here at Reactor with any projects which happen. So as I mentioned earlier, it could just be as simple as there's an older component and we're upgrading it to a newer one, or it could be a bit more to the complex side of replacing a whole system altogether, which is time consuming, but generally it's stuff I enjoy quite a bit. But in regards to that, that's what I do. In the ANSTO in general, though, there's heaps of stuff which go on here. We have heaps of in our group, I believe, of the 10 graduates which are here, 6 of us are science graduates. The other 4, including myself, are engineers. And the other science graduates, they've done heaps of cool things. Oksana, she actually came up with me here at OPAL, and she got to experience the whole being a reactor operator. So she helped with the rounding reactor, looking at parameters, going out. She got to put a few things into the core as well, or the reflector vessel, I should say. So she had a good time. Meanwhile, I still had a good time as well, just in a different way.
That sounds absolutely fascinating. We've got a couple of questions that have come through for you as well.
Yep.
This is probably a big question, so I don't know how you can paraphrase that. But from St. Benny's, can you explain how a reactor works?
Yeah, so I'll try my best at it. So in the reactor, we have uranium. So I won't go into the whole detail in terms of the enrichment of it, but we have what's called uranium-238 and 235. And what happens is the uranium-235 undergoes fission. So what that means is a neutron comes along, it hits it, it becomes unstable, and it splits off. I forgot, it turns into 2 different isotopes. But from those 2 different isotopes, it produces 3 more neutrons. 2 of those neutrons, or I guess all 3 of them technically, then go off and keep creating a chain reaction. And in general, for our reactor at least, we have are specifically designed to produce neutrons. And what we can do with these neutrons is, as I mentioned earlier, you can make nuclear medicine, you can irradiate silicon, or you can do some studies on it depending on how it reflects off things. But in general, for power reactors, they use the same principle, but instead that reaction generates a lot of heat. And it heats up water, that water turns into steam, and it then goes to a turbine, and that's how you produce electricity. But that's the short and sweet version of it. But there's definitely a lot more which goes into it, but it's fascinating. So,
well done. Well, we've got Fabiana's got a little list of questions here. So, do you want to start your own business in the future?
Sometime in the future, potentially, yeah. At the current moment, I'm loving the work here too much. Every day, I definitely think I've chosen the right career, because each day I wake up, I'm excited to actually come to work and tackle all the fun challenges there is today. But yeah, in the future, I might want to start my own business potentially. It'll probably be a bit more into the electrical side of it, so electrical consulting. So that's a whole world in its own. But at the current moment, I'm very much happy with what I'm currently doing.
Well, it sounds like it's fascinating. So they also want to know what would happen if you didn't look after the reactor.
So, good question. How this comes down to how we've designed the reactor. We've specifically built it so if we want to, we can walk away. And with how it's built and constructed, it will safely shut itself down. And we can leave it there, and however it's constructed, from all these different valves, the flow of water, it can happily sit along there. Nothing will happen to it. It can just sit there and do its own thing. And by doing its own thing, it's shut down. It won't be producing as many neutrons anymore, and we can leave it there safe and sound. In terms of once it's operating, we do want to look after it because things can go wrong. We do have safety systems in place that if it does go wrong, it trips the reactor and nothing major or catastrophic can happen. But yeah, it's inherently a safe design. So yeah, if we wanted to, we can walk away, and we know that it will be able to remain safe and it won't cause any issues.
Well, that's definitely good to know. We've got just a couple more questions coming through. We might leave a couple of them for the end, but we do have a final one on how hard is your job from a scale of 1 to 10?
Ooh, when I first started, I'd say it definitely was sitting here at about an 8 or a 9, because in my head I was just like, oh, crap, this is a nuclear reactor I'm working with now. It's very confronting at first, but once you get to know it, once I got a bit more comfortable with what I'm doing, how I fall into the whole scheme of looking after OPAL, I'd say it's probably now fallen down to a 6 or a 7. It definitely has its challenges. Some days it might only be a 1 or a 2. Other days it might jump up all the way to a 9 or a 10 even. But I'd say averaged out, it would be about a 6 or a 7.
Well, I have to say sometimes it is good having a challenge because it makes it far more interesting. Well, thank you so much, Nico. Stick around. We've got some other questions for you at the end. But
awesome.
now I would like to, thank you. I would like to invite Joseph, the seismic geophysicist from Geoscience Australia. So welcome. There we go. We've got you spotlighted, and yeah, we'd love to hear about your journey.
Great. Hello, everyone. As I said, my name's Joseph. I work at Geoscience Australia, and my role is seismic geophysicist. Sounds very fancy. Just to kind of give a bit of a background about generally like what geoscience is, what I do, all these kinds of things. Geoscience is just science of the Earth. Generally, people have a certain idea about what we will do at Geoscience. They're like, yep, 100%, I know those people. Those are the people that like go out to the field, just lick rocks all day. They're like, yep, that one's a diamond, that one's a garnet, that one's lithium, whatever it is. We have a lot of people in the building that definitely, deal with rocks and a lot of stuff like that. But what we actually do encompasses a whole lot. So it's everything to do with the Earth. So we obviously have lots to do with rocks and minerals and all those kinds of things, but also satellites, any GPS that you use in Australia, we're probably running it. Groundwater, anyone that's, boring for groundwater farmers, all those kinds of things. We help with a lot of that mapping from, reefs and coasts and a whole bunch of different things that we do. What I do personally is I work with earthquakes. So I don't make the earthquakes or anything like that. But what I do is I use those earthquakes to try and map the earth underneath Australia, essentially. Now, if you know a little bit about Australia, if you know a little bit about, earthquakes and these kinds of things, you might know that for various reasons, Australia doesn't really have many earthquakes. We're very, very stable. So what I actually do is I use earthquakes all over the world. We have a bunch of stations here in Australia. So we'll use earthquakes from Chile, America, Japan, all these different places. Those earthquakes will travel to us in Australia, and we can use that to try and basically map the earth. That's a little bit of what I do. Hopefully that just gives you a bit of a taster of the kind of work that goes on here and what I'm doing specifically. My journey into science is pretty similar to what's been said before. My interest definitely started at a very, very young age. I was definitely a rock collector as well, like Karen. However, when I kind of, went into, studying subjects at school and things like that, I loved science, absolutely loved doing everything like that, but I loved a lot of different subjects, and especially going into kind of, high school. I did chemistry and I did lots of maths, but that was really all the kind of like sciencey subjects I did. I loved drama. I was a big theatre kid, loved modern history, all these different kinds of things. And I think all of those influences personally really helped me in kind of my journey into science generally. Once I got into university, I decided that I hated all the chemistry subjects. That was just me personally. I didn't really love it. I loved doing all the physics subjects. And so I actually eventually transitioned into just studying physics, essentially, in university. I ditched all the chemistry, even though I didn't do any physics during high school or anything like that. I put all my eggs in the basket of theoretical physics. So I studied something called condensed matter physics, which again sounds very impressive. I was very blessed that I always had very fancy sounding titles. But from there, I decided that I essentially wanted to try and do something a little bit different, something that has a little bit more of a practical impact. Absolutely love theoretical physics. It still, very much holds a very dear place in my heart. But from there, I decided to just try something a little bit different. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love having a career in science, is that your skills are so transferable. I came into Geoscience Australia literally knowing almost nothing about rocks or about geoscience or anything like that. But the wonderful thing is that once you've kind of got that baseline understanding about a lot of different sciences, you can apply it to almost anything. What I have absolutely loved, just like Nico, I actually came in, I also graduated in 2017 from high school. I also came into Geoscience Australia doing a grad program. And with that, I was able to try a whole bunch of different things. So I had my hand in groundwater, I had my hand in a lot of science communication, obviously I have my hand in what I'm doing now, which is, working with earthquakes essentially. And from that, obviously I love the earthquakes the most. And one of the great things is I'm always just looking forward to what that next step is going to take. I'm really, really enjoying my role right now, but the wonderful thing about science and the wonderful thing about studying it and having a career in it and just generally having an interest in it is that you can really transition that into whatever you want, because as long as you keep that interest and you keep that enthusiasm for learning in science, you're basically going to be fitting into whatever you want. So that's just a brief kind of, of what I do, how I got into it, everything like that. So perfectly happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. There are a couple here. First one, a nice easy one. What's your favorite rock?
So I get this question a lot. My favorite rock. Now, okay, I have a bit of a controversial answer. My favorite rock is what's called pyrite. Now, if you know a little bit, you might say, Joe, that's not a rock, that's a mineral. It is a mineral, you are correct. However, technically, minerals are rocks, so it still does count as my favorite rock. Although there'd be many people in the building that would very much disagree with me naming that is my favorite rock. Well, it forms these very cool cubes. It looks really, really awesome. If you search up pyrite, it looks manufactured, but it's not. It forms naturally.
It's one of my favorites as well, I have to say. And I do
There
have
we
a
go.
pyrite cube.
Yeah,
Like
they
a
are
big
awesome.
necklace.
They are awesome. Yeah.
Question here: how many earthquakes have you mapped?
So that's a really, really good question, actually. So we will use what are called these catalogs of earthquakes. So essentially, over many, many years, we'll build up these huge amounts of earthquakes. So the earthquakes that I'm using on the order of tens to hundreds of thousands of earthquakes. So essentially, we'll use all of these earthquakes, and we'll say, it started here. We picked it up here and it took this long to travel there. And we'll use that for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of these earthquakes. And then we'll essentially use that to decide what's going on beneath the earth. There is a section here at Geoscience Australia as well that's specifically about detecting earthquakes. So I don't actually do any of the detection. Someone just hands me a sheet and says, we found an earthquake, use all the data you want. But there is a whole team here that actually goes, we found an earthquake there. And they'll detect earthquakes every single day, essentially.
Excellent. So we've got sort of a couple of questions that have come through from Amber and Jessica that are sort of, what information can you get from mapping? And is it looking just at the land or the water?
It's a really good question. So my work personally is just looking at the land, so just directly beneath Australia. Now, there's a few reasons for that. One of the reasons is that there's these particular types of earthquakes as well. So earthquakes come in a few different forms, and there's ones in particular that can't travel through water. And a lot of the time, those are the ones that I'm using. So we're just looking at the ones that travel through land. Kind of information that we're looking for can be really, really broad. One of the great things about the work that I do is it can be in really, really small scales. So you could be looking for individual, reservoirs under the earth and things like that. But what I personally do is I look for really, really large mineral systems. So, the hot ticket item these days is to do with climate change and those kinds of things. And for that, we need lots and lots of minerals for batteries and solar panels and all these kinds of things. Lithium is a big, big metal that we need to look for. Now, in Australia, there's lots and lots of minerals, but we've actually mined a lot of the minerals that we can just see on top of the earth. What we actually need to know now is what are all the ones that are hiding under the earth that we can't actually see with our naked eye. And that's essentially what I'm looking for, because they'll have very, very distinct signatures of how earthquakes will travel through them. So we're essentially looking for minerals, hopefully to try and assist with, electrification, getting away from fossil fuels, those kinds of things.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll save the rest of your questions to the end. Thank you for everyone for sharing so many wonderful questions and for your responses. So we're going to move over to Ellen from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs. I think you were with us. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. Nice to have you here. And I'll pass over to you for you to share your journey. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions knowing that you're at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right, so really my interest in paleontology, like a lot of people, I think, started when I was a kid. Naturally, I was fascinated by dinosaurs. I mean, what's not to love about dinosaurs? And this fascination really stayed with me throughout my life. And when I was finishing up high school and choosing a course in university, I went to Adelaide University and I ended up doing a course called Evolutionary Biology, which had a major in paleontology. At the time, they didn't have any pure paleontology courses on offer for me to take advantage of. There is currently one at Flinders University in Adelaide, though. So if any of you are aspiring paleontologists, keep that in mind. So I completed my degree at Adelaide, and then I went on to do an honours project at Flinders, which was looking at fossils of a type of bird called rails from New Zealand. And these were fossils that were around 20 million years old, approximately. So rails are basically those little shorebirds you might see ducking out of the reed. So some of them have that little crest on the front of their head. And then after that was complete, I began a PhD. So starting at the end of 2017, that was looking at fossil eagles and vultures from Australia. So that was quite the exciting project. It went on for a bit over 3.5 years. And during that time period, I got to work on the oldest fossil eagle in Australia, which is 25 million years old. And I also got to I essentially got to describe Australia's first fossil vulture. So vultures don't live in Australia today. We're the only continent, except for Antarctica, which doesn't have vultures. So they're big scavenging birds, and they play a very important role in ecosystems. And understanding why they went extinct here can tell us a lot about how the environment around Australia has changed in the last few 100,000 years. And then finally, I also got to work on Australia's largest extinct eagle, which was about twice the size of a wedgetail, so quite the impressive bird. So after I completed my PhD and got my research published as papers, I then went on to apply for work here at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum, where I currently work as a tour guide and get to educate guests about the dinosaurs that we hold at the museum. So the area museum is the area that Winton is in is essentially, so sorry, I think I'm tripping over my words a bit. So the Australian Age of Dinosaurs is located near Winton in Queensland, and this area is one of the best sites for finding dinosaur fossils in Australia. So most of our dinosaur species are found around here, as well as most of our best dinosaur fossils. So it's a really exciting place to be if you're a paleontologist.
Excellent, thank you. We've got so many questions coming through. Let me, where am I? Sorry, just adding me there. So the question from Adeline is, how many archaeological digs have you been on? But I'm assuming we're going to talk about paleontological digs. So yeah, how many digs have you been able to go on?
So I've been on a few. So I've been to a site called Lake Pincus in South Australia, and that's where Australia's oldest eagle comes from. It's out in the Frome Basin region, so quite a desert area, so very challenging conditions at times. I've been to the Narracourt Caves in South Australia and the Wellington Caves in New South Wales. So both those sites are megafauna, essentially, so big Australian animals that went extinct only around 50,000 years ago. And I've also had the opportunity to go up to the Flinders Ranges and see some sites up there. So a lot of them were cave sites. So again, megafauna age, so from the last few 100,000 years. And I, of course, have had some opportunities to go to dig sites in the local area around Winton. So I've been to a site up at Richmond. So that's around 100 million years old. That's marine reptiles mostly, those animals that lived in the ocean alongside the dinosaurs. And I'm also going to be going on a dig a bit later this month around Winton, which is at a fossil site about 95 million years old. So that's when the dinosaurs were alive.
Oh, wow. Someone was asking, how long does it take to study and get your PhD?
So PhDs, usually they take around 3.5 to 4 years, sometimes longer. So where I went, they really strongly encouraged you to finish within around 3 to 3.5 years. Realistically, it can take longer than that. So it really depends on what sort of data you're working with and the exact nature of what it is you're studying. So all in all, for me to get like full accreditation as a PhD, like starting like from my very first studies, so starting from university, so my undergrad in university, all the way to the end of my PhD, in total, that probably would have been around, if I'm doing my math right, I started university in 2013, started my PhD 2016, and then finished. So I did my honors in 2016, finished my PhD by 2021. So that's pretty much about 8 odd years.
So yes, it does take quite a long time. And some scientists won't do them all back to back. They might leave and go into the field and then come back to do their PhD. So we've got a couple of, just do 2 more dinosaur questions, I think. So what was the first dinosaur, the oldest dinosaur in Australia? And do you have a favorite dinosaur fossil, which is also linked to what's the oldest bone you've ever seen? It's a bit of a two-parter.
So the oldest dinosaurs in Australia, currently, that I believe that's Rhedosaurus, so one of our big sauropod dinosaurs that lived during the Jurassic period. So that's around 150 million years ago, I believe. So give or take a few million years, of course. Yeah, so Australia's not had much luck overall with dinosaur fossils. It's really only places like Winton where we've gotten lucky, and that's from a time period 95 million years ago during the Cretaceous. So we're lacking a lot of the older sites that date back to that Jurassic period, or even all the way back to the Triassic, which is 250 million years ago. So we have a lot to learn about our dinosaurs still.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We certainly have some more dinosaur questions, so stick around. But we are going to go now to Craig, who's up the Great Barrier Reef Education Department. So I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, my name's Craig. I'm one of the education team at the Reef Authority, and we're part of the Australian government. We're the lead agency when it comes to the management of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And I've been here for over 21 years. And it's been pretty much in the role of an educator for that time. But it's been a very varied role, which I'll try and describe to you with a couple of pictures. Firstly, where am I based? I'm in Townsville. And I'd just like to give a shout out to the Bindal and the Wulgurukaba peoples, who are the traditional owners of the land I'm presenting to you from here. And this big blue bit off the coast of Queensland, that's the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And coupled with the green bit, the Great Barrier Reef catchment, that's the focus of all the education programs we deliver. Now, most of my time at the Reef Authority has been in an aquarium in Townsville. I don't know if anyone's been lucky enough to visit Reef HQ Aquarium. Sadly, it's closed at the moment and it's going through a big refurbishment. But probably over 18 years, I've been involved in delivering all sorts of educational presentations to groups and students coming through the aquarium and our turtle hospital. I've even been giving presentations from underwater. I've probably given over 1,000 presentations through our video conferencing program, where we were connecting with schools and groups around Australia and internationally through our video conferencing system. And I was able to chat with those participants in those conferences. Other things I've been involved with is assisting study abroad groups that visit the region. They might be Australian schools, they might be groups visiting from North America. We get high school groups coming through, and we get masters, university level students coming through as well. And we can take them out. This is a picture of us doing a seagrass survey on one of the local shorelines. We can take those groups out after we've trained them in a way of collecting reef health information. We can take them out onto the reef and collect that data and then enter that data into our Eye on the Reef database. And working in an aquarium, you have to be part of a wider team. You have to like working with other people. And it's been a fascinating time with all the different animals that we get on the Great Barrier Reef and we've had on display in the aquarium or helped get back out into the marine park through our turtle hospital. I've had to deal with a lot of vets and assist other aquarists and technician staff with the maintenance of those living exhibits and the animals that are kept within them. So it's been an incredibly varied role, but sadly, with the closure of that aquarium in about 2020, around the time COVID was an issue, I've been pretty much based in our studio here in Townsville, so still delivering lots of virtual education programs, and then at this time of year assisting those study abroad groups and local Reef Guardian schools do those in-field citizen science programs. So that's my sort of role in the aquarium, and it's been quite a journey to get to this point. I was actually born way over here in the Bahamas of all places, and then by the age of 6 my family had moved out and we were living in Wellington in New Zealand. So I pretty much grew up in New Zealand from the age of 10 in Auckland. And I wasn't that academically focused, I must admit. I had a father who was a really super keen soccer fan. So I played soccer. I played soccer for my club. I played soccer for the school. I even represented Auckland when I was around high school age. I do remember enjoying subjects like horticulture. I did horticulture at school and I enjoyed my biological sciences. But I think the most formative experience I had, I was very fortunate to go on a family holiday to Fiji. And I really opened my eyes to that underwater world, that tropical marine life that you get on a coral reef. Nevertheless, when I finished high school, I went out to work and I was working in an administrative role with the Department of Statistics and then with the Public Trust Office in Auckland. But I decided that wasn't for me for the long term and I decided to go to university. I would have been about 23 years of age when I went to university, and I went to a university in Otago in Dunedin, down in the South Island of New Zealand, and I studied zoology, I studied botany and computer science, and they were all at an undergraduate level. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science. I spent a summer working as a PhD research assistant, chasing yellow-eyed penguins around the Otago Peninsula. That's one of my highlights of my time in Otago. When I finished my Bachelor of Science, I went on and did a postgraduate diploma in marine science, again in Otago. So I finished that and I still wanted to do something different, and I travelled all the way over to the United Kingdom, up here, the north of England, and I went to university in Manchester and did another degree, a master's degree in a branch of zoology called behavioural ecology. I finished that and I still didn't know what I really wanted to do. So I went and did a diving course up in the Lake District in the north of England. Boy, that was cold. But it was a fantastic experience. From there, I went and lived and worked on a marine station off the south coast of Ireland. And I spent months looking through a microscope, counting diatoms and dinoflagellates or phytoplankton that we were sampling in the waters off the south coast of. And that was really important for the shellfish industry in that region. Sometimes there are types of phytoplankton that can become toxic to humans as an end consumer if they eat the shellfish. So that's what I was doing, looking through a microscope, counting phytoplankton. And then I decided to come back down under, always with the intention of working on the Great Barrier Reef. And I came via the Cook Islands, and I spent some time working with the Ministry of Marine Resources, who are trying to control a coral-eating starfish, the crown of thorns starfish. So I spent a few months there, and then I ended up in Townsville, because it's a hotspot for marine science. James Cook University, we've got Institute of Marine Science just south of us, and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. But I started volunteering at the aquarium, and it's all blossomed from there over the last, as I say, 21 and a bit years. And I don't know where the time's gone. It's just flown by, but that's what they say. You know, time flies when you're having fun, and it's been a fantastic role that I've been engaged in here. So, Karen, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but also give others time to answer questions that might still be pending.
There certainly are some questions coming through. So we have, what's the most common type of coral on the Great Barrier Reef?
Oh my goodness, we get these fast weedy growing corals. I've got a skeleton from one from an earlier presentation I was doing. So we get these branching corals or those plate corals or table corals, and they're the faster growing ones, and that would be a pretty good amount of growth for a year's for one of our branching corals. So yeah, those are the faster growing weedy species.
Do you have a favourite fish? Would be very hard to choose.
Oh mate, yeah, it is. They reckon there's anywhere upwards of 1,600, maybe 2,000 types of fishes in the Great Barrier Reef region. Look, really, yeah, it's hard pressed. I've worked closely with some big fish, including a freshwater sawfish, which is actually a type of ray. We used to have one at the aquarium, and then she was caught out of our aquarium, sent over to where was it? To Singapore, and now she's living in Dubai. So that's my favourite fish, the freshwater sawfish.
And that links to some questions, and I think this is from St. Benny's as well. What inspired you to help the Great Barrier Reef?
Well, look, I think it was just that diversity of marine life I was amazed by when I went on that family holiday to Fiji. And the Great Barrier Reef is probably one of the most biologically diverse parts of the marine environment anywhere. So I really wanted to just come and see that incredible diversity for myself, and also begin to appreciate the wonderful interactions that go on with all those reef creatures.
How many animals were in the aquarium?
Oh, look, thousands. When you think about those corals, we had the biggest living coral aquarium anywhere in the world. And each one of those coral colonies is an assemblage of maybe dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of little polyp animals. And when you add to that the fishes and all the other microbial life in amongst those corals and the sand and the rocks that were part of those living exhibits, goodness me, countless hundreds of thousands, countless millions of living things in our aquarium systems.
Wow, that's incredible. And it is really important, as you said, to think about the small things as well as the big ones. Now, we have a few minutes left, so if all of our fabulous scientists can come back on screen, I'll try to spotlight everyone. Let's see if I can add everyone back in, because we had some great questions still coming in. So there's a bit of a theme about things being favourite. So to Belinda, do you have a favourite bacteria?
I always have a favourite bacteria, but it always changes from month to month, pretty much. My current favourite one is a group of bacteria. Oh, actually, they're not bacteria. They're a group of fungi. They're called anaerobic fungi. And the type of microorganism, they're called neocalimastics. And they're really interesting because these are fungi that grow without any oxygen. And they are responsible for all sorts of really good things in the gut of animals. They really to break down tough fibers in the gut. And they're also, when you think about it, really important in just recycling dead plant matter in the environment as well. So they are something, it's a bit of a treasure hunt at the moment. There's brand new ones being found every few months now. So it's like a uncharted territory of microbiology that everyone's getting very excited about at the moment. They're my favorite ones.
Now, of course, we're sticking with our favourites. So to Ellen, do you have a favourite dinosaur?
Well, I'd have to say my favorite dinosaur is Parasaurolophus. So for those of you who don't know, it's one of the plant-eating dinosaurs, and it has a long sort of cone-like crest sweeping back along its head. So if that rings a bell. I can't hear you, Belinda.
Yeah, what's the most interesting fossil that you've studied?
So the most interesting fossil that I've studied, well, that's a bit of a toss-up. So I think I'd have to go with the fossil of Australia's largest fossil eagle. So we named that Dinotoetus gaffy. And like I mentioned, it was about twice the size of a wedgetail, and it lived up until about 50,000 years ago, we think. So it went extinct very recently. And so part of the reason it might have gone extinct is perhaps some of the animals it preferred to hunt might have been also quite large. So maybe some of those species went extinct as well, and it just couldn't survive without them. We know that it lived alongside our modern raptors, like the wedge-tailed eagle. So clearly it could coexist with our modern species.
Wow, that is very interesting. Now, we are almost out of time, but we do have a few more questions. So if our panelists can stay for another 5 minutes, that would be great. I've got a question for you, Nico. What is some of the medical nuclear medicine? What's it used for?
Yep. Yeah, sure thing. So some of them we have is we make one nuclear medicine we make is lutetium-177. So they use that for prostate cancer and melanoma. That I believe it's not fully just used yet. There might still be in the trials. Don't fully quote me on that one. One of our most, the ones we make a lot of is called molybdenum-99, which we put into these generators and it decays into technetium-99m. And we use that to, if you inject it into a person, they use it to image our organs and soft tissues. That's one of the most popular ones we make. Another one we make is iodine-131. So that's when you ingest that, it's for your thyroids. There's another one called chromium-51, sorry, I should say. And that they use that to analyze your kidneys, your renal function. And I believe there's a few other ones, but those ones are the main ones we make. Most notably one being molybdenum-99.
Excellent, thank you. So this one's over to Joseph. Have you ever experienced an earthquake?
That is a great question. I actually have not. For the amount of earthquakes that I deal with day to day, I have actually never ever experienced an earthquake. Lots of people constantly tell me that they've experienced an earthquake, and I would. It's maybe I wouldn't like to experience one, depending on how bad it is. But you know, I would love to be in a soft one, maybe. But no, I haven't actually experienced one.
And do we know what the biggest earthquake in the world has been? I guess it varies from year to year, but what's the biggest one recorded so far?
I actually don't know. For this year, I'm not sure. Was the one in Turkey this year? Because it'd probably be that one would be my guess. But I actually don't know. I'm sorry. But it'd be, yeah, my guess would be the one in Turkey if that happened this year. Yeah.
No problems. And this one is going back to Craig. What's the biggest crab you've ever seen?
Oh, goodness me. Biggest crab. Probably a mud crab. These big crabs like to live in our mangrove forests around the coastline, and they can get huge. Very tasty eating, I'm told, but yeah, I haven't eaten one myself.
And do you have a favorite type of plankton?
Oh, plankton. Well, the phytoplankton I was looking at in the waters of the south coast of Ireland. So I can remember the diatoms and dinoflagellates we were looking at, and some of them are really beautiful structures. So I'm going to say it's going to be a dinoflagellate, and I think it was the Dinophysis genus from memory. So look that up on the internet, and you'll see a nice picture of one of those.
And Adeline knew that Great Barrier Reef is the largest reef, but what's the second largest reef in the world?
Was that for me, was it?
Yes, Craig. Yep.
Karen? Yes.
Second largest coral reef in the world.
Caught me out there. I think it might be, is it the Belize system? You might have to help me out there, Karen. I know the Great Barrier Reef.
They've got the best and the biggest.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, certainly there's a reef in the Caribbean or the West Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico there. I think that's the waters of Belize, and they've got a big barrier reef over there.
Excellent. Well, I've got one final question for everyone. What's your biggest challenge or accomplishment? So I'll start with you, Craig. and then we'll work our way around, and then we will have to wrap up, unfortunately. But thank you for everyone's great questions. Your biggest challenge or accomplishment throughout your career, so it doesn't have to be in your current role.
Okay. I don't know if I can give a great answer to that one. I guess the accomplishment is completing all my studies and enjoying them to the extent that I did. That was quite an achievement. And in addition to all the studies, I think, and this is maybe a tip to pass on to students to think about, is as you're going through your studies, to see how much experience, on-the-job training or experience through volunteer work. I've had a number of different roles as a volunteer in homework centres in Manchester in England, assisting students, or even assisting students in labs in Otago University, volunteering at the aquarium, volunteering with the Institute of Marine Science, build up all that experience. Because everyone comes out with a piece of paper called a university degree, but if you can demonstrate you've got that ability to work in a particular field and have those networks of contacts that you can call on for references, that would be my top tip to finish off today.
Absolutely. I also came through starting as a volunteer. It is a great way to get that experience. And also, to network as well. So Belinda, do you have a accomplishment, something that you're proudest of?
Yeah, I do. So I think that I often ask students if they want to, if they like science, do they think they want to be a scientist? And almost always students say yes. And then I ask them, where do they think they're going to work as a scientist? And most students can't tell me where they think they're going to work. They either say maybe at a university or maybe a hospital. And that is often as far as it goes. But I guess my biggest challenge was, as a scientist, I've worked all over. I've worked for companies, I've worked for universities, the CSIRO and so on. But a big challenge was, if I really wanted to create my own scientific laboratory, could I do it? And the answer was yes, I could. And I think into the future, we need to think a bit more broadly about how you can be a scientist and all the different kind of settings that you can be a scientist in. It's not only just in a university or a hospital, and you can actually go out there and create your own business as well in science. And I think that's a really important thing for students to know. It might take a little while to get there sometimes, but I saw somebody ask, what age would you be when you started a business? The answer is, the sooner you start a business, the sooner you've got experience about running a business. And if you've got science and business, you don't have to study it necessarily. You can do it on the job. And that's a really important thing to know. So that's my greatest, at the moment, accomplishment, to make my own research lab.
Excellent. Thank you. And that is a huge achievement. So well done. Nico, an achievement or a challenge?
I'd say it was a bit difficult to try to think of one. But for me, so far, my biggest accomplishment has been landing this project engineer role at OPAL. So I was a bit, because with the graduate program, I was still a bit unsure on where I wanted to end up. But as soon as this one popped up, I'm still riding on a high. I've actually only technically been a project engineer for the last month. So although I've been here at OPAL since August, I've been as a graduate. So in a way, you could say I've graduated the graduate program, and I've now made my way into this. I'd say that's my biggest accomplishment.
And congratulations. And it's you can tell how much you're enjoying it and loving it. So it's great. Excellent. Thank you. Ellen.
That for me, my biggest accomplishment was, getting my PhD done and describing all these different species for the first time. So actually bringing them to light, essentially. And introducing them to the wider world. So now that I've worked on them, we actually know more about these species, and future researchers will be able to use that as a starting point for doing their own research into the species themselves. So I'm really excited to see what scientists will discover about those eagles and vultures in the future to come.
Excellent. Thank you. And sharing that knowledge, I think that's a really important accomplishment as well. Joseph, accomplishment or a challenge?
Yeah, I would say they're pretty related. I think my biggest challenge certainly was after university, kind of piggybacking off what Craig and Belinda said. I kind of had this degree, I had this piece of paper. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. It felt really broad and really narrow at the same time. And so I think for me, honestly, my biggest challenge was finding a career in science. I knew I wanted to be in science, but sometimes that feels like it can be really, really difficult. And so I think for me, my biggest accomplishment is the fact that every day I get to do science. I get to be a scientist. And I think if I was 8 years old and I got to tell myself, you're a scientist every day, I think that would have blown my mind. And so I think that's probably my biggest challenge and my biggest accomplishment together.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And yeah, thank you all for sharing your stories and your journeys. There's a lot of similarities and differences with all of them, but the key thing we like to share in our careers in STEM is things that you are passionate about and you're interested in now. You can continue that interest throughout your whole life and a career. And I think, as Belinda said, if there's not really a career in it yet, make one. See what you can do. Start your own business. Start your own direction. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining and sharing your stories, and for everyone for participating today. Yeah, I'm always fascinated to hear everyone else's stories. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing. See you later, everyone.
See you.